Okay.
Linda, we're rolling.
Have peace time on. Okay, sorry.
Start over. All right.
Linda, take one. Wait, Linda, take one.
All right, Kirby, take one.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm so glad that you decided to give this whole virtual church thing another go. It's very brave of you. I'm very proud of you for showing up again. So I usually get playfully joked about how when I get to talk with you guys, I tend to be all about the emotions and meditation and stories, everything like that. And so tonight, I'm going to step out of my feeling stereotype and become strictly academic. So there will be zero feelings and only theological insights. So please go ahead and open up your books to page 394. And shout out to all the Harry Potter nerds if you got that reference. And shout out to all the kids who are not allowed to read Harry Potter because it's witchcraft and wizardry. But for real, tonight kicks off the first day of Holy Week. So what that means is there is an importance to each day of this week, all leading up to the cross and resurrection. We wanted you guys to be introduced to what each day of this was. So I'm going to briefly go through that. It'll be kind of quick, so stay with me. We tend to only focus on Easter, but we forget that Holy Week is 7 days devoted to preparing our hearts, our minds, and souls to remember why we're here in the first place. Because Jesus died on the cross as the ultimate symbol of love, and he did it for us. And the resurrection is to show his love can overcome all darkness, evil, death, anything. So let me take you through a brief timeline of Holy Week. So we're going to start here with Palm Sunday. And Jesus was brought to the city on a humble donkey, and he rode it into the city and actually fulfilled a prophecy found in Zechariah 9:9. It says this: "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and having salvation, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." So while he was riding in, people were waving palm branches and laying them along his path. So that is why it is called Palm Sunday, and that kicks us all off. So Jesus, he clears the temple in this next part, right down here. And you guys remember that story where he just starts flipping tables? Well, that's this story. The Pharisees were using this place in a really uncool and corrupt way, and dishonored God. And so Jesus showed up in his emotions, and tables went flying. So next, Tuesday, he goes to Mount of the Olives. And this is just a day where Jesus starts to go up there and pray and give his final talks, his final parables. And he preached one last time about what was to come. He spoke in these parables about the prophecies of end times, his second coming, and the final judgment. So that's what happened there. And then Holy Wednesday, which sounds really important, but it's actually not. Honestly, nothing really symbolic happened here, so we'll just move on. Next, Passover and the Last Supper. This is the night that Jesus takes it up a notch. He demonstrated his love and service to his disciples by washing their feet. Then he prepares to serve Passover communion. And a lot of us, because of TikTok, might imagine it being like this.
One of you will betray me tonight. Is it me, Jesus? No. Is it me, Jesus? It's not you either. Is it me, Jesus? Is it me, Jesus?
But that's not actually how it happened. Jesus shared a meal with his disciples. He broke the bread, he passed the wine, and offered a way for them to remember the sacrifice and the lengths of suffering that he was willing to go to show how much he loves his people. He later was betrayed by Judas and was arrested on this same night. So finally, we're going to focus on Good Friday. Jesus is tried before the people, sentenced to death by crucifixion, and eventually is brutally tortured and nailed to the cross. Good Friday is a day that bears weight for us. It's the day that our Savior was humiliated and he was tortured for our sake. And I just want to pause on this for a moment before we wrap up with the resurrection. I'm going to break my promise here and from being completely academic and challenge you guys in your emotions. So Good Friday is the day that Jesus died, the most untouchable and glorious and kind human to ever walk this earth. Our Savior, he died. And we take that for granted frequently when we live in 2020 because we know the end of this story. We know that Jesus will be raised from the dead and conquer death. But I just want you to think about for a second those disciples who followed this man who promised to overcome darkness. They must have felt so scared, so hopeless, so nervous that it was all for nothing. And I think about Jesus in this moment too, and I think of this Jen Hatmaker quote when she said this about Good Friday. This day was lonely for Jesus. It was excruciating, physically and emotionally and spiritually. His people left him, even turned on him. God himself and it turned his eyes, and the sky went dark, and life was extinguished. It was all so sad, so dead, so not yet resurrected. This was the day of tears and shock and loss and fear. We didn't know about the empty tomb yet. So these past few weeks, you've probably felt that loneliness, that isolation from what gives you life. And there are times when that makes our skies go dark. And how scary it must be to be like the disciples and not have the luxury of knowing what's going to come next. We live in a really ambiguous time. We don't know when the quarantine's going to end. We don't know when our lives are going to go back to normal, what it's going to look like 3 months from now. There was a time to identify with the journey of the cross. It's right now. For us to enjoy the celebration and the fullness of the resurrection, we must go through the grief, the heartache, the loneliness, the ambiguity of Holy Week. When we actually allow ourselves to go through it is when we can actually grow through it. So, Jesus was as dead can be, 3 days of death, and yet we know of our risen Savior. Even when life is dark and uncertain, we know there is a Sunday on the horizon. So I want to challenge you to prepare your hearts each day this week by trying to identify with those disciples. And on Sunday, you will truly know the relief and the beauty of a Savior who lives. So with that, we are going to wrap up here. And I appreciate you being here either on Zoom or YouTube, wherever you are. We love you and we miss you guys so much. And here in a second, we're going to switch you to your small groups. So just prepare for that. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you guys soon.